compliance with the latest ICH guidelines. And it's my pleasure to host this session presented by Clinosol Research Private Limited. As we all know, the field of clinical research is constantly evolving, and staying updated with the latest regulations is essential for ensuring ethical and high quality research. Today, we will explore the key updates in GCP R3, helping you navigate its complexities and uphold the highest scientific and ethical standards. At Clinosol, we are committed to bridging the gap between academia and industry, empowering professionals with industry-ready skills through hands-on training, expert mentorship, and exposure to real-world case studies. Our efforts have trained over 5,000 professionals, impacted 50,000 students, and collaborated with 200 plus industry partners. Um, Practical and industry-focused learning, case studies, and industry tools, and expert mentorship. And why choose Clinosol? Experienced faculty and industry experts. We providing access to a strong industry network, hands-on training stimulative, and recognized companies. An introduction of speakers. We are honored to have a distinguished panel of speakers with us today. Let me take a moment to introduce them. CS Mujibuddin Sheikh, founder and CEO of Clinosol Research, an industry veteran with 15 years of experience in top organizations like IQVIA, Paraxel, and Oracle. Dr. Sama Tabba, BSc MLT, PharmD, co-founder and CEO, Mars Lebanon, with an extensive background in clinical research, pharmacovigilance, and public health. Dr. Nagam Ramji, a certified clinical research professional with a wealth of experience in oncology research, teaching, and regulatory compliance. This session will be an excellent opportunity to gain insights from their expertise, engage in discussions, and enhance your understanding of the latest GCP updates. Without further ado, let's begin our session. I now invite Mujib sir to take us forward.
Thank you, Laukik. Thank you. I have my slides projecting in shortly. So if I'm not wrong, is my slides visible? Just quick update. Sama, can you confirm?
Yes, I will stop sharing. Okay. Okay, you should now be able to share.
Yeah. Now is my screen visible, Sama?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I have exactly 15 minutes of time. I'll try to complete it in 12 minutes or 13 minutes. So today's topic, I'll give a summary report that what exactly is ICH E6R3, how modernizing the clinical trial is been done with respect to the difference between E6R2 and R3. So the structural approach have got changed, the comparison between E6, R2 and R3. So R2 was one unified regulation and guidelines applicable for all clinical trial designs, irrespective of what therapeutic area and what the traditional interventions was there, regardless of the type of complexity also. It was the only one set of guidelines which were being developed for E6, R2, while E6, R3 was the modular framework, which got core principles into part, apply universally across all the trials. The principles are across the clinical trials are the same, but there are specific considerations for Annexure 1, which is being taken for traditional clinical trials. So Annexure 1, specifically for traditional interventional trials, we have put in E6R3. And the Annexure 2, we have developed the guidelines for non-traditional trial designs, which includes your decentralized trials and adaptive trials and real-world evidence studies. So Annexure 2 is the traditional clinical trials, which were the patient going to a hospital and conducting. The Annexure 3, which got new into picture, which was more on decentralized trials and adaptive trials and also on real world data. So this is a primary structural difference between E6, R2 and R3, what was being developed. And the more enhanced focus was there on the rights and safety and well-being of the patient participants and how we can grow the patient safety and rights and well-being by focusing mainly on the participant safety. So the first one, patient well-being, was focused in E6R3. The second one, more focus was being given on electronic consent and more clearer, more accessible and digital consent form was being given. Because we are more towards looking at digital transformation. So the informed consent has become more towards the electronic copy or digital copy and more clearer and more easier language to the patients to understand. And oversight and monitoring of clinical trial also got changed. the improved oversight has been done for making the prevention of ethical breaches and also misconduct in clinical trial, because the most of part is ethical breaches and also misconduct in clinical trials. Those were already been addressed in ICH E6R3. So mainly patient well-being, informed consent form, and oversight and monitoring of the trial was being done. So when the E6R2 was being developed, there was no word which is called as quality by design, a proactive approach, but E6R3 has given clear guidelines where it has developed quality by design, a proactive approach. The quality was discussed, but lacked detailed guidance about the quality management system or quality by design. But E6R3 has came up with very much approach of quality by design and risk-based approach and early risk assessments and also protocol development and continuous monitoring to understand the risk assessments and also to prevent the risks, and also outcome driven approach to make sure the efficient and high quality clinical research can be conducted. So now E6R3, when we call it as E6R3, the first one is quality by design. The second one is risk-based approach. The third one is early detection of risk and also during the protocol development, and also continuous monitoring to make sure the improvements throughout the clinical trial life cycle, and also the outcome driven approach for ensuring the efficiency and high quality clinical research studies can be done. So which is the difference between E6R2 and R3? The new word which came into E6R3, ICH E6R3, the GCP, was data governance and integrity. So the integrity and data governance was more important. This was not being termed and coined in E6R2, but we got data governance and integrity. The comprehensive data cycle was being done, collecting to reporting. So the collection of data, validation and processing, and also incubation, and also the reconciliation and also reporting of clinical trial data, and about data governance and integrity. The strengthening of security system to prevent the data breaches like firewalls or the security system, the warehouses, the data mining and data clouding has been more discussed. Emphasis was being there were audit trial to make sure the data traceability was there. There was no deletion of data, and there was a data traceability. So data governance and integrity came into picture in ICH E6R3, where ensuring the accuracy, reliability, and security of clinical data is more critical for regulatory compliance and also the scientific credibility. So the data governance and integrity came into picture only in ICH E6R3. There are a couple of words which got changed in ICH E6R3, the latest guidelines, which is for the investigator and also sponsor responsibility. There are some modifications which were being done. So the clearer definitions, role definitions for investigator and sponsor must be established. Oversight delegation practices, what can be done, what cannot be done by investigator and sponsor, is being clearly mentioned. Improved collaboration, there are collaborations between investigator, sponsor, and also CRO, and also the vendors and lab persons, and all those improved collaborations encourages open communication and shared responsibility between the sponsors and investigators. And remote monitoring is being added advantage for ICH E6R3. Adoption of remote monitoring strategies to improve the compliance and oversight was being taken care in your investigator and sponsor responsibility in ICH E6R3. Sponsor and investigator must adopt a proactive, collaborative approach for clinical trial management, so that the compliance of the regulations and also ethical standards following is being continuously done. So the most important term which ICH E6R3 came into picture is inclusion of decentralized clinical trial. There was a traditional clinical trials, but we came up with something which is called as the decentralized clinical trials. The traditional clinical trials was required a in-person visit where patients goes to a hospital and visited. Limited patient participation and engagement of the patient was very less, and the turnaround time of a patient participating into clinical trial was less. But decentralized was remote patient monitoring and remote patient participation into clinical trial. Home-based data collection, virtual visits can be done with respect to patient continuing into clinical trial. What was the impact of continuing the decentralized clinical trials in terms of clinical trials, and also in terms of following the regulations? Was increase accessibility for diverse population. Patient does not need to participate into clinical trial and come and walk into the hospital, but he can participate at any point in time. Reduce trial cost, because traveling is being reduced, the trial cost is being reduced, and improves the efficiencies of participation into clinical trials. And the biggest word which came into ICH E6R3 was risk-based monitoring, RBM strategy, to identify the earlier risk and also to prevent the risk and monitoring the risk and make sure the standardized process is being done. So the targeted monitoring was being started and central monitoring was done. So the central monitoring is AI-driven analytics for risk detection and also anomalies or any abnormalities can be identified with the AI-driven analytics for risk assessments, and also targeted monitoring was being done. Why this matters is it can improve our data quality, patient safety, and also it can regulatory compliance. Also, it can do it while reducing the unnecessary site visits where risk-based monitoring can be done. There are a couple of terminology glossaries which got updated. First one, trial participation replaces the subject to emphasize the respect and autonomy for the subject. So it was got a name called as subject and investigational product. The clarified to cover broader range of a drug or a biologic and digital therapeutics, because earlier it was a different kind of a terminology, but now it's an investigational product which can be added as a drug or a biologic or a digital therapeutic which can be used. And what is the implementation and timeline for transition plans? It was initiated with January 6, 2025, the latest E6R3 guidelines. And there is a transition period where regulatory agencies and stakeholders must be updating the process of compliance. The update is strengthening for clinical trial standards, emphasizing modernize clinical trial methodologies, improve patient safety and data integrity, risk-based approaches, support for decentralized clinical trial. By integrating the ICH E6R3 principles and trials can become more efficient, ethical, and also patient-focused can be done on this. So with this, I wanted to thank Sama and also Nakam, and please do follow us at the below link for YouTube and LinkedIn and Instagram. And you can follow me with my user links, which you can follow on LinkedIn, which is CEO Clinosol Research, and my Instagram is Mujibuddin Sheikh at the rate Instagram ID. So thank you so much for patient listening. I am open for question, but because of lack of time, we'll be taking the questions at the end. So over to you, Sama. I hope I have not crossed your 15 minutes of target. Sama, you are on mute. You are on mute.
Yes, thank you so much. No, not at all. It's okay regarding the time, but the thing is that you talked about everything we are going to talk about, so I don't know if there is something left to talk about. You talked about it all.
But
Anyway.
you always talk more deeper.
Yes, I will talk. I will begin my session with the basics of GCP, and I would begin, okay, so that maybe there are some attendees who are still fresh, graduates who are still new to the topic, because we presented this topic at another platform, and really, there were so many basic questions, okay? So we need to go a little bit lower level, and then Dr. Naham will continue with all the changes that you already talked about. Okay, so thank you so much, Mujib, for giving me the floor. As I was introduced, I am Sama Al-Tabba. I am Lebanese. I live in Beirut, and I have a BS in Medical Laboratory Technology and a PharmD in Clinical Pharmacy. And I am the CEO and owner of, co-founder of Mars Medical Agency for Research and Statistics. Okay, so I'm going to talk about what is good clinical practice, as I told you from the basics, from the beginning. The history and evolution of good clinical practice in brief. Then I'll talk about general structure of the GCP guideline, the ICH E6, and I will introduce you about what does it mean E6, because believe me, till now some people ask what is E6, okay? Regarding the fourth topic, we will talk about the cornerstones of GCP. I will be talking about that. And finally, the history of GCP revisions. What were the versions? Dr. Najib talked about them, Mujib talked about them briefly. I will just expand a little bit more, okay? So, what is good clinical practice? Did you know that one poorly conducted clinical trial can cost millions of dollars? And not only that, it can jeopardize patient safety, okay? So, when we say clinical trial, it is not just a very easy process. It has many impacts on the most important thing in life, which is patient safety, patient's life. People can die. So, what is good clinical practice? Good clinical practice is an international ethical and scientific quality standard for designing, conducting, recording, and reporting clinical trials involving human participants. So, since clinical trials are not so safe, they are a process which needs monitoring, needs standards, needs guidelines. So we have this good clinical practice which ensures that. But let us go back to the history and how did that begin? How did the process or the idea of good clinical practice begin? Okay, so the evolution of good clinical practice or time evolution of good clinical practice, it began with the year 1901 with the St. Louis tetanus incidence. Imagine a parent in 1901 and his or her child has diphtheria, okay, which is a deadly bacterial infection. A new treatment, diphtheria antitoxin, was available. But instead of a cure, the treatment was contaminated with tetanus and the child dies. This is exactly what happened in St. Louis, Missouri, in the US, where multiple children lost their lives due to contaminated antitoxin. At the time, there were no laws ensuring drug purity or manufacturing safety. This tragedy was the first early warning that drug safety regulations were desperately highly needed. Fast forward to 1937, the elixir sulfanilamide tragedy. Okay? A company releases a new liquid antibiotic, which is elixir sulfanilamide, to treat bacterial infections. Okay, that's fine, but there is one fatal problem. The solvent which was used to dissolve the drug was diethylene glycol. More than 100 people, which is not safe, the diethylene glycol. More than 100 people, including children, died from kidney failure before authorities stepped in. The public was outraged, and this led to the passage of the 1938 Federal Food, Drug and Cosmetic Act, which required drugs to be tested for safety before being sold. Okay, so this was a one step forward for the regulation of medications. Then in 1947, let's travel to 1947, where we have the Nuremberg Code, learning from war crimes. Okay, this was aftermath of the World War II. The World War, if you remember, we studied in the history, the world was in shock as details emerging from the horrific human experiments conducted by the Nazis, the Nazi doctors in the camps, okay? So prisoners were subjected to torture procedures, no consent, and even surgical procedures without any anesthesia. In response to that, the Nuremberg Code was created, establishing the first global principles of ethical research and the most important thing, the informed consent, taking a consent from the patient to let him undergo these procedures. For the first time, medical research ethics was a little bit put into writing. Okay? Now, between the 1950s and 1960s, a new miracle drug, thalidomide, was being marketed as a cure for the morning sickness of the poor pregnant women who had nausea. It seemed harmless at the beginning, and thousands of women took it. But within few years, something horrifying was happening. Suddenly, babies were born without limbs, without hands, and deformities in their limbs. Doctors realized that thalidomide was responsible for that. But after they realized that, the damage was already happened, and led to a strict drug approval law, including something called 1962 Kefauver-Harris Amendment in the US, which required drugs to be also safe and effective. So as you see, we are moving more towards safety and effectiveness of drugs. Following the lessons of Nuremberg and thalidomide, the World Medical Association, which we know as WMA, introduced the Declaration of Helsinki, and this declaration expanded the ethical guidelines where it became the foundation of modern clinical research ethics. By 1966, there was a doctor who is called Henry Beecher. He published 22 unethical clinical studies conducted in the US. And this shocked the medical community and pushed for stricter oversight of research. These were really, really unethical studies conducted. In 1972, we have the Tuskegee syphilis study. This happened, we can go back to the 1930s, where African American men in Alabama, okay, they were diagnosed with syphilis. So they took these people, and instead of giving them a drug which cures them, which was already known in the 1940s, penicillin, they still withheld the treatment to observe the disease progression. This continued for 40 years. This unethical process continued for 40 years until in 1972 here, there was a very brave journalist who exposed the scandal and the public was outraged. And this led to the very, very, very famous Belmont report. And we all hear about it. This Belmont report defined key ethical principles for research, respect of persons, beneficence, and justice. Okay? Then, by the early 1980s, the WHO and the CIOMS, the Council for International Organization of Medical Sciences, worked to create universal ethical standards. So we are building up, you know. Their guidelines reinforced informed consent and ethical review boards, which are still today the most two important cornerstones of clinical trials. In 1991, as clinical trials became more global, okay, and different countries had different regulations, there was confusion and inconsistencies. If you make a clinical trial for a certain drug in this country, you want to market it in another country because there are different rules and conditions, you have to repeat the clinical trial. So the International Council of Harmonization, ICH, was established to align or to make it a unified process, drug development regulation worldwide. It brought together all the regulators and pharmaceutical industry to create harmonized guidelines for drug development, and to ensure that clinical trials are unified regarding the guidelines and the steps and the process. Okay, this effort, led to the in 1996, the ICH published the Good Clinical Practice GCP E6 guideline, which became till now the gold standard for conducting clinical trials. Okay, and this guideline ensured protection of participants' rights and safety. In 2016, the ICH updated the GCP with ICH E6R2, which introduced, as Dr. Mujib mentioned, the risk-based monitoring, and Naham will talk about that. Okay, and finally, in 2023, the most recently, ICH E6R3, the third revision, was introduced. And this revision modernized GCP to accommodate new trial study design. So sorry if I bored you with all this, but I want to show you that we are moving forward, and maybe in the upcoming years, we will have more strict regulations towards that. Okay, so now, to make the long story short, what is the general structure of GCP guideline? Let me begin from the definition and we'll go forward. The ICH E6 Good GCP, a good clinical practice, it's structured to provide a comprehensive framework for conducting clinical trials ethically, scientifically, and in compliance, most important, with global standards. If you go inside the website of the ich.org, which published these guidelines, you will go to ICH guidelines. You will see 4 categories: the Q, quality guidelines, the efficacy guidelines, the safety guidelines, and the multidisciplinary guidelines. Okay, these are the 4 categories. Under it, the quality guidelines ensures pharmaceutical quality and risk management. Okay, the efficacy guidelines guides clinical trial design and reporting. So this is why we have next to GCP E. So the letter E comes from here. It's from the category of efficacy guidelines. Then the safety guideline evaluate drug safety risks, and the multidisciplinary guideline covers cross-disciplinary regulatory standards. So these are the 4 categories. We are here regarding the GCP guideline in the efficacy guideline. If you click on it, you will have all these guidelines under this category. We will zoom in, you will look at it, you will go to E6, which is the good clinical practice. So if you want to access it, you go to the ich.org, you will put all guidelines, you will have the 4 categories, and then you will click on efficacy guidelines. It will give you all the efficacy guidelines. You will go to E6, good clinical practice, because in the last session, everybody told me where can we access it. Okay, now, regarding its structure, this is its full title, ICH Harmonized Guideline for Good Clinical Practice. E6, now we understand what's E6, okay? And R3, the third revision. That's simple, okay? The characteristics, it's 86 pages. It's developed by the ICH Expert Working Group. Dr. Naham will talk more about how they develop it. and they review it. And the final version was adopted on January 6, 2025, and it will be worked on or implemented in 23 July. The deadline for everybody to begin working with it, 2025. Okay? Now, this is the revised structure of it. I will not talk about it. This is Dr. Naham's part. Okay? What I mean is when you download it, you will have this guideline with all these topics. Okay? Now, what are the cornerstones, very briefly, of GCP? First of all, we must take care of the patient safety and right. Okay? This is the most important thing. For example, participants must be fully informed about the risks and benefits of a trial. They must also have the freedom to withdraw anytime they want from the trial without any penalty or loss of benefit. This is what's called informed consent, and it's a very fundamental part of GCP. Next, ensure reliable data. You know, the most important part or the endpoint of a clinical trial is the data. So we must ensure the scientific integrity by setting standards of how the data should be collected, analyzed, and reported. Because if you get poor data, then all the results are poor, then it will affect us, even if the clinical trial was done wonderfully. Okay? Without GCP, there is a real risk that the data may be misinterpreted or biased. Okay? And third, it builds global trust in medical research. When I have certain standards, I will be it will be very trustful, and I will be rest assured that it is done meeting the common standards. Okay? So these standards will ensure the trust in medical research. Okay? When everybody follows the same guideline, whether in Europe, in the US, or in Asia, it builds global confidence. Okay? And the same medication can be marketed anywhere in the world. Okay? And finally, the history of GCP revisions. I will talk about them. As we said, the initial adoption was in 1996, the first draft. It's called R1. Okay? And its purpose was just to harmonize clinical trials. Okay? It introduced standardized procedures, informed consent. It was very basic: investigator responsibilities, data management, etc. Then we had the second revision in 2016. And as we said, it introduced risk-based monitoring, focusing on the clinical trial aspects where we have risk, and they, according to this risk, they will reduce the unnecessary burdens. Okay? And they also emphasized on the sponsor and investigator responsibilities to ensure the equality, because at the end, they are the ones running the clinical trial. Okay? And third, the third revision, which is in 2023, will be implemented, meaning that anyone carrying a clinical trial after this date, he should abide to the new revision. Okay? I will not talk about it because it will be covered in details by Dr. Naham. And thank you for Dr. Mujib. He gave us the points that we will be talking about. By the way, Dr. Mujib, your presentation was wonderful, and the slides were very attractive. I like them. Okay? So, and it integrates modern technology. I will not talk about it. Okay? Finally, this is all what I'm going to be talking about. Sorry if I took from your time. And I will give now the floor to Dr. Naham. Dr. Naham, please. The floor is all yours, dear.
Thank you, Sama. Thank you
okay.
for your great work. Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Naham. You can. Are you now host? You can share.
Yes, you can see my screen.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. So let's share it. Okay.
Yes. But if you can make it bigger, please.
Yeah, everything is clear.
Excellent. Yes, that's it.
Thanks for your time, and really thank you for joining. Just I wanted to disclose some point before starting. First of all, today is not like a real GCP training session, because in this revision, really they have like a major changes, if we can say, and detailed changes. So here we need to simplify the changes and give you like an idea about the new terminology have been added in this guideline. But for real GCP training, really we need like around 2 days workshop followed by like an examples and really like quizzes in order to feel that you digest this new guideline. So inshallah we can make like this workshop later on with the Clinosol. So this is the first disclosure. The second disclosure, that some slides have been taken from the ICH website. So in order to maintain the confidentiality of this site, but it's important because they clearly mentioned what are the changes and how it will affect the guideline. So, so the session outline today, after like Sama have give you like a clear about how the GCP being started and what's the importance now to follow the GCP. We will go to about how do the GCP revisions take places and what are the revised structure in details in the revision 3. And then I will give you like a small comparison between R2 and R3, then what will happen next. So in summary, how this revision take place. As Mujib said, that the R2 mainly was focused when the emerging use of the electronic data sources, including the electronic medical record. You remember we were like in a paper format, then now most of us now being emerging to the EMR. So the R2 was developed there in order to know how to maintain the confidentiality of the data when using the AMR. Besides the risk management process using these electronic records. After these decades, the clinical trial have become more complex with respect of technology, the quality, the quantity of data collected now, people now asking for market research, big data, and so on. So now there's a time to change in order that trial can be, we maintain the safety and the credibility of the data always. So just to give you an idea how these revisions take place. First of all, people identify the need for revision because, as I said, there is advancement in science, technology, and regulatory practices, including digital tools, decentralized trial, and risk-based approaches. Then there is a group named Expert Working Group. This is a team of global experts, draft revision based on the scientific development, as we said. After these groups, what this happen, they will, first of all, they have like steps. So the step 1, they drafted the revised guideline. The step 2, this draft guideline will be shared with the regulatory authority and stakeholder for feedback, even including the public consultation. They open it for public, and even if you go in that time to the ICH website, they say like, if you have like a comment, please share it. Then there is a step 3 where the consensus building. They will refine the guideline based on the feedback, which lead to final approval. Then the adoption, which is we are now here, the final adoption with our step 4 as the new GCP standard coming up. So it was adopted in January 6, 2025. Then we'll go the step 5, which is the implementation. So the implementation, they will give you like a timeline to implement these changes. And then, as you know, will be ongoing review and monitoring most time based on the changes and the feedback. So this is the process how it gone. They started since 2024, and then now they adopt these changes. So as I said, the principle and Annex 1 have reached step 5, which is the implementation, and will be effective from June 25 and adopted in 3rd of July 25. So the R2 or revision 2 will remain effective until 11 June 25. So why these times? So in order to the stakeholder to make a transition to the new version while still adhering to the previous standards. So the people will digest like the new guideline, people will give training on these, know how that regulation or stakeholder will be implemented. So this is like the transition between the adoption and the implementation, between the step 4 and step 5. This is the transition period. So here's just like I will show you like the history about the changes in the E6. So the first one was in 1995, then there is another changes in 1996. The R1 was implemented in June, then the R2, as we said, it's been implemented in 2016, and now when the R6, R3 being in 2023, and the implementation, the adoption take place in January 25. So here you will find it in the first page in the guideline in order to let you know what's the changes have been done and the date of each changes. So now, what are the revised structure of the R3? As Mujib said, that there was like a principle from 1 to 11. Before we will have like around 13 principle. Now they make it 11 principle because they have like a structure and they give you like a sub comment between each point. Before we did not see that. Before we see it like only like 13 points and we have to follow. Now like we have like a sub point under each or one of these. So Annex 1 is the consideration for interventional clinical trial, while Annex 2 it will be developed later. Additional consideration for interventional clinical trial, which is the non-traditional design. So as I read that the Annex 1 and the principle will become intact. Whatever changes or addition will give, they will add it in the Annex 2. So in order not to confuse the people and not make major changes to all of other guidelines. So this is like a newly even developed that there is a principle and there is an annexes. Before it was like a principle and then there was like a part for each party, like the sponsor, the investigator, and so on. But here we feel like some categories being added in this guideline. So, for example, you will find first of all the introduction, the principle, the Annex 1, which covers the most like important parties, which are the institution review board, the investigator part, and the sponsor, and they add a major about the data governance and the role of investigator and the role of the sponsor toward these data. Then the appendixes, which are the cover the investigator brochure, the clinical trial protocol and protocol amendments, and the essential record for conduct of a clinical trial. And even the essential document or the essential record, it's been major changes because they tell you like what of like this document can be like a normal document and then how can be changed to essential document. So how to document it as an essential document, how to save it essential document, and then how to report it to the sponsor and to inform them this will be an essential document. Because the emerging of everything digitalized tools really give you a burden that everything has to be documented and even disclosed to the parties in advance. And then the Annex 2, as we said, it's under public consultation now, and they give time from November 24 to the March 25. So what's the structure and the content? Now there is a new structure to provide more clarity and better readability. So the principle here remain relevant as technology, method, and trial design evolve. Annexes and appendixes are strategy intended to enable easier and faster. This is what I said. So they provide additional clarity in the scope and as also to facilitate innovation in clinical trial design technology. So they are utilizing the decentralized clinical trial elements reflecting the trial that are closely resemble the routine clinical practice. And also they facilitate the use of digital health technology in terms of how they can capture the data, using the wearable devices, and how to analyze these results when you got it from these technology based. So I need to go deep in the decentralized clinical trial because this is the most important term evolved now. It's the decentralized allow trial-related activity to occur remotely at location convenient for trial subject. They focus more about the convenience of the participant. So the decentralized can include the telehealth visit with the trial personnel or in-home visit with remote trial personnel or even visit with local healthcare provided as a normal practice before. So all of this cover under the decentralized clinical trial. So also they will also reflect that the clinical trial that include decentralized element occur at location other than the traditional clinical trial site visit. As I said, maybe in home or like televisit and so on. These are the principles that are the new being added. And as I said, this being taken from the ICH website. So for example, they introduced something called risk proportionality, which is focused on the participant safety and reliability of results, risk beyond those associated with standard medical care. So they give like detailed bullet and about each one in order to cover all the aspects. The role and responsibility, they make about much rule about how what are the main rules to be delegated to the sponsor, to the investigator, how to maintain the oversight between the risk management tool and so on. So now the rules are much more detailed than before. The ethical principle make sure not to unnecessarily exclude particular participant population. They include more population in order to make the trial much more generalizable to all populations. So they allow to include more population than before. The consent form, I will give you like now an example how the consent form being changes in this guideline. The IRB review, they ask to have like periodic review more than before to applicable study design. Even now, the science, they ask to have like periodic review of scientific knowledge even. Not only the ethical knowledge, they ask to be review about the scientific knowledge. Then the qualified individual, here they insist to have like a different expertise and training to be trained more in all aspects of clinical trial regulation. Then the quality of and amount of information generated should support good decision making. The protocol, and even in the protocol, when you write the protocol, they insist that you have like they name it key trial objectives. Before we did not hear about that. They insist that you have a well-designed trial objective protocol, cover all of these objectives and even the statistical approach or analysis plan and the data management plan has to match these objectives in order to get a qualified and quality good data. So this is what reliable result. What they said, the trial process should support the trial objective. Before we did not hear about that in details. And even just that the need like should incorporate efficient and well-controlled process of managing records through appropriate management of data integrity. And they insist about the transparency of clinical trial. And then, as Mujib said about the investigator product, they now make sure that the investigator product should be carefully managed to align the treatment assignment and maintain blinding when applicable, and even how to maintain the quality and the integrity, the accountability of this trial investigation product at the site. So for example, in the consent form, I took it as it is because really it's very nice. So it's varied approach to the provision of the consent form and discussion about the trial can be used. This can include, for example, providing text in different formats and they allow images and video using telephone or video conferring with investigator site staff. Also, the consent form is documented by means of a written or electronic signed and dated consent form. And even the obtained consent they allow to be remotely may be considered one appropriate. This was really new happened in this guideline. Also, the information should be clear and concise as possible, use simple language and avoid unnecessary volume and complexity. When before we will use like around 24, 34 something consent form now, they really wanted to maintain it as simple as form. And here, for example, in exceptional circumstances, like for example, in public health emergency, when the usual method to obtain and document consent form are not possible, they use alternative measure and technology in accordance with the local IRB should be considered. So especially like in some emergency, like they saw it in COVID, time, there is a lot of research and there is a lot of things cannot be done with the consent form because of the widespread of the disease and the wide even spread of the research used. So now they make it as a guideline. So in some emergency, some regulation can be changed for these people. And here, like as I said, there is include a new population. What they said, when a minor is to be included as a participant, age-appropriate assent information should be provided and discussed with the minor as part of the consent process. So a process for consent should be considered if during the trial or even if the minor reach age of legal consent in accordance with applicable regulatory requirements. So they make more detailed about how the minor, how the assent, and even they revised the assent terminology in this new guideline. So here, if you open the guideline, this is how we can say how it's the annex and the table of contents. So you will find introduction. The scope have been changes, the principle of the ICH, and then the annex one, as we said, the GCP. So you see, like a lot of bullet was not before. The investigator, it's really like more details than before, and then you will go with the sponsor. And then here the new section about, as I said, the data governance, which is like a huge addition on this guideline. And then you will find the appendix about the investigator brochure, about the clinical trial protocol, then the essential record, and then we will find the glossary. So here what I said, this is like the principle. Before we was having like 1, 2, 3, 4 principle. Now under each principle, there is like a sub-principle under each. So this one, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 was not extensive as here in this guideline. So just like I show you, and this is like here, like see, and the number, the principle number 2, it's still like there is a sub principle under each one. Just here, I give you like a hint. So when you open the guideline, you will be familiar where these changes been implemented. So the data governance has also like started that sponsors should apply the quality control to the relevant stage of data handling to ensure the data are sufficient quality to generate reliable result. So they manage the computerized system to ensure that they are fit for purpose. This is a new term even being evolved that you can customize the computerized system to fit the purpose of the trial or the key objective of the trial. So the fit and purpose terminology was not before. So this is really it's a major changes that are very helpful changes. So at least you will have like utilized much more trial and enable like use it in a friendly use, not only like as they said it will resemble the routine clinical practice. It's just like the people now say that they have to change their clinical practice in order to have their clinical trial. No, we can use your computerized system in order to fit the purpose of this clinical trial. Get my point? This is a new. So also in this section, they have like comprehensive approach to data system. They have like talked about the IT security, how the data protection have been taking place, the data validation, the metadata. This is a new also term. Get it? What are the metadata and the data acquisition tool? Which is the I will explain it. All of this new terminology being added in this data governance section. So again, the quality and the amount of the information generated in a clinical trial should be sufficient to address the trial objective, as we said in the protocol, provide confidence in the trial result, and support good decision making. This was newly in this section. So in the protocol, as I said, they make major changes when you generate your protocol. So building adaptability to the protocol, including acceptable range, for example, specific protocol provision, can reduce the number of deviation or in some instance the requirement for protocol amendment. So here, for example, they ask that the protocol describe in a clear, concise, and operationally feasible protocol. this operational feasible protocol was not mentioned before, because the protocol should be designed in a way to minimize unnecessary complexity and to mitigate eliminate the important risk to the right safety and well-being of trial objective. Also, they addressing the implication of withdrawal of consent in more details in their protocol. So here they said about how the protocol life cycle will take in place. Will start from the data capture, then relevant metadata include the audit trial. This is about the metadata new definition, review of data and metadata, then data correction, data transfer, exchange and migration, finalization of dataset prior to analysis, retention and access to these computerized data, then how to be instructed. So they described it in details about this life cycle of the clinical trial data. As I said, I will not go over in details because this is not a training, but just like to know what are the changes. So there is a new glossary term about the assent, computerized system, the validation, data acquisition tool, data integrity, the metadata, the reference safety information, service provider, and signature. And also it's not only new glossary term, they revised the glossary term in terms of the adverse event reaction trial definitions, the essential record, source record, the sponsor, and others. So just like I need to mention what that mean, but the data acquisition tool, it's the same about a paper or electronic tool designed to collect data and associated metadata from a data originator in a clinical trial. So they changed, like we said before, data collection tool, we said CRF. Now it's called data acquisition tool. Also, the service provider, who are these? Or are they the person or organization providing a service used during the conduct of a clinical trial to either the sponsor or the investigator party. So this is the new terminology. So also, as I said, they provide more clarity about the adverse event and adverse reaction and update some definitions like the investigator side to update when they say the clinical trial operation in decentralized setting. As we said, like can be remotely, it can be in the home in visits. So the investigator side have been not only in where is the trial site, whereas the team are only in home. It cover the decentralized settings. Then I hope I cover all of the aspects in the R3. Now about the session outline, the comparison between the R2 and R6, sorry, R3. I tried to make it comparison, and this is the reference. So the structure between was like 13, now there are 11 detailed principle with sub-point that will go to improving the clarity and the applicability. The scope have been changed, the flexibility and innovation. They add the proportionality and adaptability of the protocol, the risk-based quality management, the stakeholder, they promote the shared responsibility in the stakeholder, digital technology integration. They ask that the people can use the digital tool, the e-system, and decentralized operation. Ethical consideration, as I said, there make sure that the periodic review of the ethical and scientific review, the data integrity, as we said about how the life cycle will take place, the data governance in terms of the new terminology and the new applicability of these metadata, the inclusion and diversity of the population and the consent form in this guideline. So what's happening next? Now, usually after, as we said, they give the transition period. So they open it for training and education. So the stakeholder will need to provide training and education to their staff to ensure they understand and can comply with the updated guideline. Then we have to review and update policy, any policy of the research center, the CROs, the sponsor, even like some the institutional place, they have to need to review update their policy and procedure to align with the new guideline. Then they will have to implement changes outlined in the guidelines, for example, the enhanced data governance and the data quality and the risk management. And in summary, So its various approaches in the clinical trial design and conduct have the potential to streamline the drug development and increase the convenience of a clinical trial participation. The intent of the revised guideline is to facilitate the innovation in a clinical trial design and conduct, while at the same time provide the guidance to help ensure participant safety and the clinical trial produce reliable results. So at the end, all of us have the same goal: patient safety and well-being, and at the end, reliable data. But we have to maintain the new technology being evolved in this decade, and the training material are planned to be developed. If you open the ICH guideline, website, they have like a very nice presentation, and even they update it every other time in order to help you that use it in your institution or your place. So I hope like I cover everything, and I'm sorry if I take much time from the actual time. And we are happy for question and answer now for your team. Thank you a lot.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nagam. Dr. Mujib?
Yeah, Sama, I'm back. Can we take 1 or 2 questions if we have
Sure.
2 minutes?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. We have 3 minutes of time.
Yes. And I'm sorry, Mujib, like you can share our email address with the attendees, so if they have something, they can ask us and reach us at any time.
Perfect. I think that's a very nice idea, Nagam. Laukik, can you share the
Yes,
feedback?
I will write it in chat.
Sure.
And Sama, you can write it too. Yes.
Feedback form so that we can send mails with the mail ID of thank you, Sama. I think that's helped us so much.
Thank you so much, Mujib. Thank you so much.
Yeah. If anyone have any other questions on something, you can write a mail to Sama and Nagam. We'll be sending a feedback form. So once the feedback form is filled, we'll be releasing the certificate shortly. We are open for questions. Any kind of questions, we are happy to answer. Okay.
There's one question that was asked, if you allow me to answer it. Someone is asking, what is ICH? Well, ICH, it is the abbreviation means the International Council for Harmonization. Okay, and it was established. It was like a meeting established to align the drug development regulations worldwide. It brought together all regulators from all over the world, pharmaceutical industry representatives, to create a harmonized guideline for drug development and to ensure that clinical trials meet worldwide standards. So this is for the one who asked, what is ICH? Any more questions?
We have released a feedback form, guys. So you can complete the feedback forms. We'll be sending the certificates shortly.
Yes.
Yeah. Any other questions anyone have? Okay. Laukik, we can close the sessions. Can you go ahead with time?
Sure. This is an insightful session on good clinical practice, R3. I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks to our esteemed speakers for sharing their expertise and valuable insight with us today. And your knowledge and experience have truly enriched our understanding GCP compliance and its latest updates. Once again, big thank you all participation for joining us today. Your engagement and enthusiasm make these sessions meaningful and impactful. We appreciate your time and look forward to seeing you at our future webinars. Take care, stay connected, and keep learning.
Thank you. Thank you, Sama. Thank you, Nagam.
Thank you so much.
I'll get connected to both of you after this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.